Okay, so let's dive right into this deep dive.
Yeah.
You know, imagine like you're back in 1976.
Okay.
Watergate isn't just some word you hear thrown around.
Right.
It's like this raw wound
Yeah.
in America's psyche, and everybody is
Absolutely
trying to grasp how it all went down, how a president could be involved in something so ethically just shaky, just huge.
A big deal.
And right into that charged atmosphere,
Yeah.
this book drops.
Oh, yeah.
The Final Days
Uh-huh.
by Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein.
Of course.
And not just any journalists,
Right.
but the Watergate journalists.
Exactly.
The duo that broke the story wide open.
Their reputation definitely precedes them. I mean, it's like they had a direct line into the White House.
Exactly. So their take on the end of Nixon's presidency, that's got to be packed with insider info, right?
It is.
I mean, what were some of the big questions swirling around back then that this book promised to answer?
Well, I think you have to remember this is like before the 24/7 news cycle that we're all used to now. So people were really hungry for the details. They wanted to know what was really said and done in those final days, what was going through Nixon's mind as things were kind of closing in on him.
Right. So it's not just about the events, in a timeline.
Exactly.
It's about the human element,
Yeah.
the psychology.
Absolutely. And that's where the book really delivers, I think.
Okay.
It paints a really vivid picture of Nixon as this man who's under immense pressure.
Yeah.
He's facing impeachment, his support is crumbling.
Crumbling.
And the book really portrays him as increasingly isolated, prone to anger, struggling with insomnia.
So beyond the headlines,
Yeah.
we get this intimate look at his internal world.
Exactly. And it's not always flattering.
Right.
But it is fascinating because it reveals these complexities of his personality, strengths and weaknesses, his political brilliance alongside these almost tragic flaws.
Okay, so we're getting this insider view of his struggles.
Yeah.
But this book isn't just about Nixon, right?
No.
I mean, there's a whole cast of characters all caught up in this political
There is.
maelstrom.
Right, and their stories are just as compelling as his. I think the book delves into the motivations and actions of these key figures, like Alexander Haig, who was Nixon's chief of staff.
Right.
And initially, he seems like a very staunch defender of Nixon.
Okay.
But as the evidence mounts, we start to see Haig taking some actions that, well, let's just say they raise a lot of questions.
Okay, so we have Haig,
Yeah.
who's maybe not as loyal as he seems.
Potentially.
Who else stands out?
Well, there's John Dean,
Okay.
who was Nixon's former White House counsel.
Right.
His testimony was absolutely crucial in exposing that Watergate cover-up.
Yeah.
And in the final days, we really see how his words continue to haunt Nixon.
Oh, yeah?
It's like a ghost from his past, this constant reminder of the betrayal.
I can imagine that's got to sting, having your own legal counsel turn against you.
Absolutely.
Oof.
And then there's Rosemary Woods. Okay.
Who was Nixon's devoted secretary.
Right.
She famously claimed to have accidentally erased part of a crucial tape.
Accidentally erased? Come on, was everybody around Nixon this careless?
That is the million-dollar question.
Really?
The book suggests there might be more to this story, that perhaps Woods' actions weren't as accidental as she claimed.
Now that's what I call a cliffhanger.
Right.
So you've got Haig potentially playing both sides. We got Dean's damning testimony coming back to haunt Nixon, and a loyal secretary who maybe isn't so innocent after all.
Right.
Sounds like everybody's scrambling to protect themselves as things fall apart.
Yes, and I think that's another layer of this book that makes it so fascinating.
Okay.
It's not just about the big political events. It's about the personal dramas.
Right.
The internal conflicts, the web of loyalty and self-preservation that was woven throughout the Nixon White House.
So we're getting this sense of the atmosphere, the tension, the shifting allegiances.
Yeah.
But of course, we can't talk about the final days without talking about the tapes.
The tapes.
Yes.
These recordings from Nixon's office are practically a character in their own right in this book.
Absolutely. They were more than just gossip.
Right.
They were the evidence that could either prove or disprove Nixon's involvement in that cover-up.
And I know they become a huge legal battle, right?
They do the fight to get those tapes released.
Yeah.
The arguments over executive privilege.
Yeah.
The parsing of every word and silence. It's all there in the book.
And then there's that infamous smoking gun tape, right?
Yes.
The one that really sealed his fate.
Exactly. The recording from June 23, 1972, where Nixon is heard authorizing the use of the CIA to obstruct the FBI's Watergate investigation.
So this wasn't just hearsay.
No.
Or speculation.
Nope.
This was hard proof.
Hard proof.
Right on tape, contradicting everything that he had been saying publicly.
It was a bombshell, and the book really captures the impact of that revelation.
Yeah.
The sense of shock, the betrayal, the realization that the president had been lying to the American people.
Okay, so imagine you're Nixon.
Okay.
You got these damning tapes coming out.
Uh-huh.
The public is outraged.
Yeah.
Your own party is starting to turn against you. What's the reaction like from Congress?
Well, initially, there was a lot of resistance to the idea of impeaching a president.
Right.
Especially among Republicans. There was a sense of loyalty to Nixon, a desire to protect the office, even if it meant overlooking his actions.
But surely the tapes changed everything, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you defend a president who is caught red-handed obstructing justice?
It was a turning point.
Okay.
The book describes how after that smoking gun tape was released, the mood in Congress really shifted dramatically. Even Nixon's closest allies began to distance themselves, recognizing that his position was no longer tenable.
And one of the most dramatic moments, I think, in the book is when Senator Barry Goldwater,
yes,
a conservative icon, personally visits Nixon to deliver the bad news.
Yes. That scene is incredibly powerful. Goldwater tells Nixon point blank that he no longer has the support of the Republican leadership.
Wow.
And that resignation is his only option.
Talk about a blow. I mean, I can only imagine how devastating that must have been for Nixon to hear it from somebody he respected, somebody who represented the heart of his party.
It was a crushing moment, and it really underscores the complete crumbling of support that Nixon was experiencing in those final days.
Okay, so we've got the tapes,
the
crumbling support, the political maneuvering.
Yes.
But this book also delves into something deeper, right?
It does.
Nixon's state of mind during this whole ordeal.
Yes. One of the most fascinating aspects of the book, I think.
Okay.
It doesn't just cover the political events.
Yeah.
It tries to get inside Nixon's head.
Okay.
To understand what he was thinking and feeling and struggling with as his world was kind of collapsing around him.
So what was he like?
Well,
give us the insider scoop.
The book portrays him as being incredibly isolated, prone to these angry outbursts, struggling with insomnia. He's described as pacing the halls of the White House late at night,
Wow.
Lost in thought, haunted by the decisions he's made and the consequences that he's facing.
It's like Shakespearean tragedy playing out in the Oval Office.
It is, and it raises so many questions,
Yeah.
Was he truly delusional? Did he believe his own lies? Or was he just this master manipulator,
right?
Playing the victim until the very end?
These are questions that historians are still debating today.
They are.
But the book gives us this unique window into his psyche.
Yes.
And allows us to, draw our own conclusions.
Exactly. And I think that's part of what makes the final days so compelling.
Right.
It's not just a dry account of political events. It's a psychological study of a man facing his own downfall, grappling with his legacy, and ultimately coming to terms with the consequences of his actions.
It's a reminder that even presidents, even the most powerful people in the world, are still human beings with their own flaws, their own demons, and their own capacity for both greatness and self-destruction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We left off talking about Nixon as this isolated figure,
right?
Almost wrestling with himself as the scandals unfold. But he's not acting in a vacuum, right? I mean, there are people around him making choices that affect how things play out.
Right. And it's fascinating how the final days takes us behind the curtain, showing us the conversations, the strategies, the moments of both loyalty and betrayal that shape those final days.
You really get a sense of the pressure cooker atmosphere in the White House. Everyone's trying to figure out their next move. What's best for them, what's best for the country, what's best for the Republican Party.
Right.
All while this massive scandal's unfolding.
And in the midst of all this chaos, you have Alexander Haig, Nixon's chief of staff, trying to hold everything together.
Haig is such a fascinating figure in this story. At the start, he seems like Nixon's right-hand man.
Okay.
Fiercely loyal, defending him to the hilt. But as the evidence piles up, we see a different side of Haig emerging. He's having these secret meetings with Vice President Ford.
Wow.
Discreetly preparing for a potential transition of power.
Talk about reading the writing on the wall. It sounds like Haig was trying to prevent a complete meltdown, knowing that Nixon's position was becoming, increasingly untenable.
Exactly. He was trying to ensure stability.
Yeah.
both for the country and for the Republican Party.
Okay.
And you have to remember, this is all happening before Nixon has even officially decided to resign.
Right.
So Haig is taking a huge risk here, potentially undermining his own position to try and safeguard the nation's future.
It really highlights the immense pressure that everyone was under.
Absolutely.
You can practically feel the weight of history bearing down on them.
It's palpable.
Yeah.
And speaking of pressure, the book also gives us these incredible glimpses into Nixon's inner circle, the family members, the loyalists who stood by him, even as the evidence against him mounted.
I'm particularly struck by the portrayal of Nixon's daughters, Tricia and Julie.
Yes.
I mean, they were fiercely loyal, defending their father in public and private, seemingly unwavering in their belief in his innocence.
It must have been incredibly difficult for them to witness their father, a man who had achieved so much, being brought down in such a public and humiliating way.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder, did they truly believe he was innocent?
Right.
Or were they just clinging to that belief as a way to cope with the unimaginable?
That's a question the book doesn't explicitly answer.
Okay.
But it does offer a really nuanced portrayal of their loyalty, showing both their unwavering support and the emotional toll that the scandal took on them.
What about the other loyalists?
Yeah.
The political advisors, the aides, the ones that stuck by Nixon even as the walls were closing in.
Well, the book explores their motivations, too.
Yeah.
And it's not always pretty.
Okay.
Some seem motivated by genuine belief in Nixon's innocence, while others appear more concerned with protecting their own careers and reputations.
Right. It's a reminder that power can be intoxicating.
It can.
That it can foster a culture of silence and complicity where people are afraid to speak truth to power, even when they know it's the right thing to do.
And in Nixon's case, that culture of silence ultimately contributed to his downfall.
Yeah.
It prevented him from getting honest advice, from seeing the reality of his situation, and from making the decisions that might have salvaged his presidency.
Now, we've talked a lot about the inner circle.
Yeah.
But what about the nation as a whole?
Right.
I mean, how's the public reacting to all of this?
The book captures the mood of the country beautifully.
Okay.
There's this sense of betrayal, disillusionment, and growing anger at the government.
I can only imagine to see a president, someone who's supposed to represent, the highest ideals of the nation.
Yes.
Embroiled in such a scandal.
Right.
It must have been a deeply unsettling experience.
It was. And it led to this deep crisis of confidence in government.
Yeah.
This cynicism that some argue continues to affect American politics to this day.
Right. It's like this event shattered a certain naivete about those in power.
Exactly.
A belief that the system would always protect us from corruption and abuse.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that even in a democracy, even in a system designed to prevent tyranny, vigilance is essential.
Right.
We can't simply assume that those in power will always act in the best interests of the people. We have to hold them accountable.
So we've got this backdrop of national turmoil, public outrage, political maneuvering.
Yes.
And in the middle of it all, there's this epic legal battle raging around Nixon.
There is.
With the tapes as the central piece of evidence.
The legal aspects of the final days are just as gripping as the political drama. We see Nixon and his lawyers fighting tooth and nail to keep those tapes secret.
Right.
Arguing executive privilege, national security, anything to prevent their release.
It's almost like a chess match,
It is.
With both sides making strategic moves.
Yes.
Anticipating each other's actions, trying to outmaneuver the other.
And the tension just builds with each legal setback for Nixon.
Right.
You can practically feel the walls closing in as the Supreme Court ultimately rules against him.
Wow.
Ordering him to turn over the tapes.
It's a turning point, I think.
It is.
A moment where he realizes he can no longer control the narrative.
Right.
That the truth as captured on those tapes is about to be revealed.
And that's where the book really gets under your skin. It takes you inside those legal battles, showing you the arguments, the strategies, the personalities involved, and that mounting pressure on Nixon as he realizes he's running out of options.
It's not just about the legal arguments, though, right? It's about the human drama unfolding behind the scenes.
Exactly. We see the impact of these legal setbacks on Nixon's inner circle, the shifting alliances, the betrayals, and the growing realization that the situation is becoming hopeless.
And one of the most intriguing figures in this whole drama is Alexander Haig, Nixon's chief of staff.
He's the ultimate pragmatist in this story.
Yeah.
While publicly remaining loyal to Nixon, he's also working behind the scenes, meeting with Ford, preparing for the inevitable transition of power.
It's almost like he's playing a double game.
He is.
Trying to balance his loyalty to Nixon with his responsibility to the country.
Exactly. He's walking a tightrope.
Yeah.
And the book really captures the tension and complexity of his position.
Right.
On the one hand, he's trying to protect the president to manage the crisis.
Right.
But on the other hand, he's also looking out for the nation's best interests.
Yeah.
Realizing that Nixon's continued presence in office is becoming increasingly damaging.
So Haig is operating in this gray area, making these tough choices, trying to navigate a path through uncharted territory.
Right.
What about the tapes themselves? We know that they were ultimately released.
Yes.
But how did that happen? What was the fallout?
Well, as the legal battles raged, public pressure for the release of the tapes really intensified.
Yeah.
And the media was relentless in its pursuit of the truth, with Woodward and Bernstein leading the charge.
I mean, they were like bulldogs.
They were.
Weren't they never letting go of the story, always digging deeper, pushing harder for answers?
They were, and their work, along with the efforts of other journalists and investigators and members of Congress, really created this groundswell of support for transparency and accountability.
So it wasn't just about legal rulings.
No.
It was about a shift in public consciousness.
It was.
A demand for the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be.
Exactly. And ultimately, that pressure became too much for Nixon to withstand. The book describes him agonizing over the decision to release the tapes, knowing that doing so would likely seal his fate.
It must have been a crushing realization that the evidence of his own wrongdoing was about to be revealed to the world.
It was, and the book captures the drama of that decision. The internal struggle, the weight of history, and the sense of inevitability as Nixon finally agrees to make the tapes public.
And of course, those tapes, particularly the infamous smoking gun tape, proved to be devastating.
They did. The release of the tapes sent shockwaves through the nation. Even Nixon's most ardent supporters were forced to confront the reality of his actions. The extent of his involvement in the cover-up and the lengths to which he had gone to obstruct justice.
It's like this moment where the illusion shatters.
It is.
And everyone, even those who had been unwilling to turn a blind eye, can no longer deny the truth.
Exactly. And it leads to a rapid unraveling of Nixon's support. In Congress, the calls for impeachment grow louder, even among Republicans. And in the public, the sense of betrayal and outrage intensifies.
It's like watching a dam break.
It is.
With the floodgates of truth and accountability bursting open.
It's a powerful image, and it leads us to the final act of this political tragedy, Nixon's decision to resign.
We left off with this sense of, the dam breaking the truth, being undeniable, and Nixon facing the inevitable. But even knowing the ending, the final days, doesn't lose its grip. How does the book portray those last moments in the White House?
It's a mixture of chaos and, strangely, a kind of stillness. The book describes the frenzy of activity as everyone prepares for that transition of power. But there's also the sense of Nixon withdrawing almost like he's already a ghost in his own house.
That's such a vivid image.
Yeah.
Like the presidency is slipping away from him even before he's physically gone.
Exactly. There are these poignant scenes of him saying goodbye to his staff, having these almost melancholy dinners with his family. It's clear he's grappling with his legacy, what he'll be remembered for. And it's heavy stuff, even for someone as seemingly tough as Nixon.
And then, of course, there's the resignation speech itself. I've read the transcript, but I bet the book adds a whole other layer to it.
It does. You get the behind-the-scenes details, the agonizing over every word, the arguments between advisors about how much contrition to show, how much defiance. It's like watching a tightrope walk between accepting responsibility and trying to salvage some shred of reputation.
It must have been a nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to craft that speech.
Yeah.
What tone did he ultimately strike?
It's fascinating, really. There are moments of genuine regret acknowledging the pain he's caused the nation, but there's also this thread of justification, almost blaming the circumstances and definitely clinging to his accomplishments.
It sounds like classic Nixon. Even in defeat, he's trying to control the narrative.
Exactly. And the book doesn't shy away from that complexity. It lets you see the different facets of the man, the politician, the husband, the father, all wrestling with this momentous decision.
Okay, so the speech is given, resignation's official. What happens next? Does the book cover Nixon's life post-presidency?
Not in detail. Remember, the focus is tightly on those final days.
But
But it does end at the beginning of his attempts to rebuild his life, to find some kind of redemption, both personally and in the eyes of history.
It's almost like there's a whole other book waiting to be written about that part of his life.
Right.
The disgraced president trying to figure out who he is without the power and the spotlight.
Right. And it makes you wonder, what lessons did he learn from this experience?
Yeah.
Did he ever fully grasp the consequences of his actions? Those are questions. The Final Days leaves open,
right,
but they certainly linger in your mind long after you finish reading.
So this book gives us this incredible close-up of a presidency imploding, but it also feels so relevant to us today, even decades later.
It does.
What are some of the bigger takeaways, the lessons we can learn from the final days?
Well, for me, it's a stark reminder that power without accountability is a dangerous thing. The book shows how a culture of secrecy and loyalty, above all else, can create a breeding ground for corruption.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a cautionary tale about the importance of checks and balances, a free press, and a citizenry that's willing to question those in authority.
Right. It's not enough to just assume the system will work.
Yeah.
We all have a role to play.
We do.
In safeguarding our democracy.
Yeah. And The Final Days also highlights the human element in all of this.
Right.
We see how even the most powerful people are capable of making terrible mistakes, how ambition and paranoia can cloud their judgment.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that no one is above the law and that the consequences of our actions, especially when we hold positions of power, can be far-reaching and devastating.
The Final Days is a powerful and thought-provoking book. It's not just a historical account. It's a cautionary tale, a study of human nature, and a reminder of the fragility of our democracy.
Well said, and I think it's a book that everyone, regardless of their political affiliation, should read.
Yeah.
It offers a unique glimpse into a pivotal moment in American history. And it raises these timeless questions about power, accountability, and the human condition.
Thank you for guiding us through this deep dive into the Final Days. It's been a fascinating and insightful journey.
My pleasure. And to our listeners, we encourage you to pick up a copy of this book.
Yes.
And explore its depths for yourselves.
Absolutely.
It's a story that will stay with you long after you finish reading.
Thank you for tuning in to the Power Book of Podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join our growing community. Click the bell icon so you never miss an update. We have so much more inspiring content coming your way.